Welcome to Scary Stories. We've always run narratives about women getting involved with werewolves, and it's usually something that these ladies present to me as something they see as romantic. In response to some of these stories, though, we've gotten letters from other women who claim that their relationships didn't turn out to be as rewarding as the ones we've previously discussed. Oh, they all agree that the werewolf cuts a romantic figure, and they admit that the early days of their romances were memorable and good. The running theme in all these stories seems to be that the werewolf generally does not seem to want to mate for life. We've got 3 stories in which these women make their cases, and the first one is called I Didn't Know I Was Marrying a Werewolf. Dear Scary Stories NYC, when my father passed away in 1977, my mother and I inherited enough money to move to an old fixer-upper house in the area around Baldwin in Michigan. We were a bit outside of town in the woods, which at first was really cool and relaxing. It smells differently in the forest, and I loved every part about having our house out there. At least I did until the first night I saw that dog-headed, hairy man's glowing eyes reflecting off my window. This man had eyes like little pocket keyring flashlights, and their glow on my window was the first thing I ever noticed about this guy. Next, I noticed the window becoming fogged, and my brain put the pieces together about what I was seeing. There was a Michigan dogman outside. It was standing up like a bear or a man, and it was very close to the glass. I leaped out of bed and turned on the room light in time to see the most horrific-looking creature that ever walked God's green earth. It was like Michael Landon the teenage werewolf, only it wasn't wearing a leather jacket. In fact, it wasn't looking like it was wearing anything at all. It was an animal. It wasn't a man, but it stood there like a man. I was looking at something from out of a scary movie, except it was a lot scarier to me because it seemed to be real and alive, not a guy wearing a rubber costume. I screamed, and my mother ran into the room. By the time she was there, the man thing was gone. I told her I'd seen the dogman, the Michigan dogman, and she started soothing me by saying that I just had a bad dream. Now, I was 19 years old when this happened, and at that age, you do not like to be talked to as though you were a child. So I said to my mother that it was a real dog-headed man, and it had been fogging up my window. Just then the front doorbell rang, and both of us nearly hit the ceiling. It was after 10 at night, so nobody should have had any reason to be ringing our bell. When we peeked out the front side window, it was just about the handsomest man with a unibrow I'd ever seen. He was saying he had tracked a strange canine to the area and wanted to know if we'd seen it. Against my mother's wishes, I threw the door open, and I told this guy anything he wanted to know, plus a few other things too, like my phone number. His name was Biff, but my mother and I called him Beef, and with good reason. He was built like a big, lean bull, a hairy one, with 5 o'clock shadow 2 minutes after shaving, but a bull of a man, nonetheless. Well, you know already where this all led me to. We had the kind of a romance that I'd always wanted to have. He was an expert on the Michigan dogman, and I felt safe from the creature when he was around. Eventually we married, and first, that was fantastic too. Once we started to settle into our patterns, though, once the relationship started to become predictable, Beef started staying out later and hanging around me less and less. One night I saw the dogman outside the window again, but my husband was not there to protect me. Everything had gone back to how it was before I met him. I was once more at the mercy of the beast. But then I noticed that the dogman had a tattered version of the shirt that my husband had worn out that morning. My feelings turned to panic, wondering what the monster had done with Beef. And then I realized those torn clothing remnants were on that dogman. He had been the one wearing them, and then he outgrew them, and that's why it looked the way it did. I am not good at math, so it took a while of me staring before my brain added 2 and 2 and realized in one stunning shocked moment that this was not a dogman at all outside my window. No, this was a werewolf. This creature was now too large to wear the clothing it had on when it used to be, well, when it used to be my husband. Look, I won't act like it was over right away between me and him, but that was the beginning of the end. I mean, finding out that your husband and lover is also the thing you fear the most in the world is a confusing set of issues to cope with. I was furious at him for lying, and we had loud arguments over this. That's arguments with an S at the end, as in several, or many. He would always get all mushy and talk about how fate brought us together. But I knew it was his lust, and that it was that same lust that was now bringing him together with whichever other ladies he ran into any night. I have to say, it was occasionally very exciting to be together with the creature that I feared more than anything else. When he would allow me to be in charge of our relationship, it was a kind of a power rush, and I did find myself attracted to that. It didn't feel like a healthy kind of attraction, though. We split up and got back together over and over through the late 1990s when I finally had to put a stop to it. I moved to a place not known for either dogmen or werewolves, and now I'm living the old spinster life. I don't mind it as much as I thought I would, but I have my hobbies, and I have my friends. Most of my memories of marriage are bad ones, and that's clearly because I didn't know I was marrying a werewolf. I divorced a Wolfman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I want to issue a warning to the young women who seem to be so in love with werewolves. I listen to stories like that with very mixed feelings. I understand the attraction toward men who turn into animals. I also learned the hard way that such a man is not the star that you should be hitching your wagon to. I mean, if you can love him and leave him, then sure, take a chance on a brute like my ex-husband. But if you want a husband that will stick with you long term, choose a man who stays a man, even when the full moon is high in the sky. The guy I married was the handsomest man I had ever seen when he walked into the diner I was working at one day. I used to get talked to nicely sometimes by older and lonelier truckers, but this guy was my type, and actually a few years younger than me. I wanted to flirt back, but I am not exactly a model, so I wasn't sure that he wasn't just making fun of me. He asked for my number, and at first I actually said no. I knew he could do better than me, and so it made little sense why he'd be acting like this. It took him another 2 trips to the diner before I started to wonder if maybe he was being serious. When he asked me to ride with him on the back of his Harley, I felt a surge of electricity run through me. I had always wanted to ride on the back of a really big guy's Harley, but nobody had ever invited me before. I tried to act casual about it, and I asked him where we would ride the bike to. He looked me right in my face with his big black eyes, and he asked me, "Does it really matter, darling?" Somehow that corny line melted my heart. Now, I don't really know how to explain the next part without getting you in trouble on YouTube, but the way I found out he was a werewolf was a different way than most women find this out about their mate. We were actually engaged in, the act itself when he had a transformative moment. Those of you old enough to figure out what I just was trying to say, great. Those of you too young, well, just forget I said anything, okay? Anyway, yeah, I was a very involved part of that particular transformation. And although it was quite a reality shifter for me, I was still in love with that man, or whatever it was. It was not the werewolfism itself which tore us apart. I'll tell you when I knew the marriage was over, and that I needed a divorce. I was walking through the park on my lunch break when I was very surprised and happy to see my husband off in the distance. He was talking to someone I didn't recognize, but she was a very attractive young woman. As I walked up behind my man, I heard the young thing ask him, "But where would we go?" And I heard him answer, "Does it really matter, darling?" She giggled, and she was putty in his hands. He had used the same line on her that he had used on me. I wanted to scream at him in public, but the woman he was talking to was intimidatingly beautiful. I didn't want to play the screaming old harpy. It would probably only make her like him more and pity him for how mistreated he was at home or whatever. So I walked away from the scene and I got a divorce lawyer before the end of the following day. This was not a lifestyle I was going to be able to live inside of. That's not to say there aren't a number of women who I know that continue to stick it out with their werewolf husbands. It takes a certain kind of woman to marry a werewolf. But there are very few who are like me and would ever even try to get out of the marriage. Now I've known and I still know some other women who are associated in various capacities with werewolf men. Although it's not unheard of to break away from the life, most seem to be lifers. I even know one woman who got dumped by one werewolf and then hooked up with a second one. Most of these women are large living people who want every day that they're alive to be an interesting day. Some of them just flat out love their man thing. Like this very heavy-set lady I know that I'll call Kathy. Her husband is a normal-sized man, but he turns into absolutely the largest werewolf I have ever witnessed. He's hit on me in both forms, human and dogman, if you can even imagine such a thing. I'd say he's a wolf in many different ways. I used to pity Kathy because I didn't think she knew what a cad she was married to. It took me years to find out that she knew all along what her husband was like, but she just didn't care. As long as he comes back to me when he's done with each of them was all she had to say about it. I asked her if it didn't drive her absolutely nuts that he was charming women everywhere he went, and she laughed nervously, then fell silent. She told me she saw the wife of a big rock star being interviewed for a documentary. When the interviewer asked that rock star wife what I had just asked this woman, the rock star wife answered by explaining the secret to staying married. The secret to staying married, you see, is not getting divorced. I know she's right about that one aspect of it. Being married to a werewolf is the same as being married to a rock star. Women are always going to be interested in him, no matter how old he gets. You're either going to have to get used to that, or you're going to be inviting one whole lot of misery into your life. I knew I wasn't going to be able to get used to it, and I knew I didn't want to be miserable either. And in the end, that's the full explanation of why I divorced a wolfman. My werewolf husband loves me too much. Dear Scary Stories NYC, my husband started off wooing me off my feet with his wolfish charm, then sealing the deal when he showed me. He didn't tell me, but he showed me that he was an actual real-life werewolf, sort of like in the movies and books, but not exactly. We got married when I was 17 against my mother's wishes, and we've stayed married now 58 years. That makes me 75 and him 72, at least when he's his human self. But when he becomes the wolf, I'm telling you, I can hardly tell how he's aged, if he has aged at all, in the over half a century that I've known him. When he's the werewolf, he still seems to have the strength of 10 men, although he tells me that he's slowing down and that he barely has the strength of 8 or 9 men. I have been asked by a number of women over the decades if I would recommend marrying a werewolf of any variety. I tell them the same bit of advice that my daddy used to give me about every subject that I asked him about. When I would ask him if I should do something, he would answer me, "You should only ever do what your heart won't allow you not to do, darling." His philosophy was the same about everything. If you try not to do something, but find yourself doing it anyway, then that means it's one of only 2 things. Either it's fate, and you have no choice but to take that path to live your destiny, or it's a dangerous addiction, in which case you should check yourself into rehab as soon as possible. So, if you find yourself in my situation of loving a man who is a werebeast, try to save yourself. Try to get away. Try to avoid him. If you find you can be happy elsewhere, then he was not your fate. Never date or marry a werewolf unless you're pretty certain that you know it's your fate. Never marry a werewolf that you haven't tried to get away from and failed. For most of the women I've known who are attracted to werewolf men, their most difficult issues are his fooling around with other women, and also the furious temper that some werewolves have trouble controlling. For me, it's kind of the opposite, and you know what? It's all my own fault. Years back, I started devising a plan to keep my man at home. This dates back to before everything was about feminism. Back then, it was about getting along with other humans, especially the one you lived with. So I read an article back then about keeping your man at home, so his eyes don't stray. And I realized that none of these ideas would work if your husband needed to roam in nature, killing things a few nights out of every month. So anyway, I just decided to drug his food on the nights of the full moon. Simple solution. He still transformed, but he rolled around on the floor whimpering and chasing rabbits in his dreams. He didn't go around eating the neighbor's pets any longer. I had found a way to sort of domesticate the werewolf, or at least subdue him. Between that and spoiling my husband, both personalities were gradually becoming my pets. I found I could drug the werewolf less and less each time. These days, even when he turns into the dog-headed Wolfman, he has a big belly, and he's overly affectionate. I don't mind him sitting on the ground near me and panting when he's in canine form, but I can't stand being licked all over my face. If he wants to kiss me, he needs to wait till he's back in his normal old man form. To be honest, when other werewolf wives complain to me about their men straying and looking at other women, I'm almost jealous. I mean, they don't have any idea how clingy some men can get if you feed them well enough for long enough. Now, I'm not going to say that I want my husband to cheat on me, but maybe he could take up tennis or jogging or something. And maybe it's even time for me to stop drugging him on each full moon. Maybe it would be better to let him roam free again each month. He was a much more exciting guy when he had that air of danger and mystery about him. Plus, it would do him some good to get out and go for a walk once in a while. Both he and the werewolf need to get rid of that spare tire around their middle. But for now at least, I'm still mixing sedatives into his Alpo. Because my werewolf husband loves me too much. We hope you like those somewhat offbeat narratives, and we hope you join us in wishing a speedy recovery to our supervising producer, CS, who is unfortunately under the weather right now. Please send her your healing wishes and so forth, as she is a big part of why we've managed to make it all the way to 2023. And our newest executive producer on the scene is a channel member by the name of James Green. James gets to see our secret uncensored stories, of which 2 brand new ones are coming out this week. Here to explain the deeds is our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hank. Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that when it cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.